Hey everyone, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. I'm pleased to be speaking with Stuart Webb today, a fractional CSO. He'll tell us about that. Speaker and mentor. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Stuart.
Hi, Joy. Very pleased to be with you. Thank you very much for spending a few minutes talking to me. My history is different to many in this field. I spent a number of years as a scientist working in the field of viruses, human viruses, in particular those viruses that are persistent within the human body. But that I eventually realized wasn't where I was best focused. Um, I then left after 15 years of working in that field, decided that I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial. I was really fascinated and interested in business ideas. So I left that field, joined a small consultancy, then set up my own business, then joined some others. Having exited from that business, I joined some others and we set up another consultancy, which we grew to around 600 odd people before we sold out to an organization based in the US, and then did something with another business, and then eventually had a corporate career with one of the largest telecom providers in Europe, and then went back to being what I am now, which is somebody who works for scale up businesses, helping them to scale from a few people in their team to 50, 60, 80 people in the team, and giving them the strategies that I used whilst I scaled my businesses, helping them to do exactly the same thing.
I did not know that you worked in viruses.
I worked in viruses. Yeah, I worked with persistent human viruses for a number of years. Fascinating. Still love the science, but I just was never ever going to be ideally suited for working in a university. I was always a bit too interested in other things. And at the time, there wasn't a huge call for people who understood viruses. I know in the last 5 years, they've become much more popular. But I was, at the time, there wasn't a huge call for people to sort of go and set up, laboratories in order to make vaccines or anything silly like that. So I decided I'd go and do something else. I was interested very much whilst I was in the hospital, which is where I did most of my research. I was very interested in trying to find ways of better serving the patients. So I used my time to find ways of sort of getting the laboratory results, because I was based in the pathology laboratory, despite the fact that I was doing research. But in the evenings, I used to stop doing that and then go and work on how to get the laboratory results back out to the patients as quickly as possible. And that was actually the sort of first part of the business that I started with. I realized that moving work from where it was being done to where it needed to be done was what I was really passionate about.
And that is sort of the startup mentality. It's finding work niches that need a solution.
That's the one. It's find a problem. I mean, this is the thing I keep saying, and I work. I mean, you said, Joy, that I kind of work now a lot with people who are scaling the businesses, and the thing that I say to them is, describe to me in 3 short sentences the problem that you solve and the solution you have. And if people can't do that, they're probably still searching for the business ideas. So I kind of break it down as simply as that. What is the problem that somebody has, and what is the solution you have? And that's actually the start of a marketing campaign. It's start of a sales campaign. It's start of a sales conversation. Mr. and Mr. Business Person, you have this problem. I have this solution. How can we bring the two together so that your problem disappears with my solution? That's the beginning of marketing. That's the beginning of a sales conversation. And if you can break it down to as simple as that, here's your problem. Let me describe it to you. Here's my solution. Let me tell you how this solution fits your problem, how you get from here, your problem, to my solution. You can basically get to a sales conversation very quickly. And too few business people think of it in that terms. They see the features of what they've got. They talk about the great stuff, but they don't talk about this is the problem, this is the solution, this is the benefit. So I help a lot of business owners bring that down so that they can actually have those scaled conversations and then start to scale their business.
It's sometimes it's when a business starts, perhaps the founder, the creator, has actually identified that very specifically. But once you bring it around and create it well, it immediately changes because businesses are always changing. But it's easy to sort of get lost in the minutia and to sort of misallocate services times. I mean, really, the whole business end of it. Here's the question: the whole business end of it is separate from here's the solution. It's like, now how do you organize that solution into a business?
Yeah, and let me take a very real example of a business I was helping work with just recently. Their problem actually was they had a very, very low sales conversion. They had a really great solution. They had a really low sales conversion, and there was a couple of problems. The founder was absolutely passionate and was running around doing a lot of the work in order to try and work it out. But he had two problems. One of which is he couldn't explain to the people who were doing the job on the ground. He wasn't able to explain to them very well what was in his head. He hadn't sort of worked out how to put his knowledge, his experience, his expertise into a situation where they could actually understand it and therefore explain it to the potential customers. The other problem they had, which sort of began to manifest itself as I was working with them, was when I actually took their proposals. The sales team had managed to work out that they could get in front of the customer and they could sort of do something, and then they'd say, we'll send you a proposal. But the proposal became about them. Here's us, here's what our customer, here's what our founder did, this is what our founder knows, blah, 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 blah. And customers would look at it and go, I don't see me in this proposal. I hear all about the founder, and the founder sounds wonderful. I've never met them. I don't understand what they know, but so it doesn't apply to me. And it was one of those situations where, once again, it was centered on the founder, who somehow had to do all the heavy lifting. So, if the founder got involved, they often converted. But when the founder didn't, the sales team couldn't convert because they kept going back to the founder, and the founder only had 24 hours in every day, no matter how much extra effort he put in and no matter how many hours he burned trying to get around every single potential customer. So I actually took the proposal and said, let's break it down into what the customer's going to get from it. We go back to what I was saying to you before. We took that and we said, okay, what is it the customer gets from your solution? And when we put the proposal back in, and I think the proposal started out at about 12 or 15 pages, we took it back and it became a 2-page proposal. This is what we heard was your problem. This is how our solution fits your problem. Would you like help? That was basically what the proposal did. And suddenly they got this massive increase in converted customers, because customers looked at it and went, oh, I can see myself in the situation that they described. And indeed, I want the solution. Too often, that's where startups fail to scale, because it becomes about the founder, or it becomes about what the founder can do, rather than becoming a scalable solution where the founder passes the knowledge in such a way that a system develops. And that system becomes something that other people can operate. Now, that was the essence of my first business, which was about how do we move the work away from the laboratory technician into the hands of the clinician to help a patient. And that was all I was doing, is I was just taking it basically and saying the clinician doesn't understand the test. The test has shown this result. How do we actually just get it to them as quickly as possible? And so I very quickly learned about this. How do I pass my knowledge into a system so that I don't have to be involved? And that becomes a scalable solution.
Yeah, so many times, if it's a small effort, especially in the beginning, they don't necessarily want to let go, or they're afraid to let go. Maybe maybe the people I've hired won't understand, or I know it the best. It really needs to be a highly trusted. You have to trust that you've hired the right people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very difficult. Startups don't always start up, or they do, and they fail to launch because these are very difficult situations. You could have a genius with fabulous solution, and he just can't get it across.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is that trust in that team, Joy, because you know two things can happen. You can hire people but then not trust them, or you can really trust them but not actually pass on to them and let them do it. And I know too many founders that have done, to an extent, both of those. I was working with a founder. The founder that originally started the business has had to bring in a professional manager effectively. And the professional manager has basically come in and is now, they came in initially as a sort of COO and they've now taken over as CEO. And the one thing the founder has had to realize is that CEO is going around and is actually is releasing people. And he's releasing the people who at the moment don't quite have the right fit for where the business is going. And it's a tough thing for the founder to see these friends of theirs being released, but they're the wrong people in the wrong place. That they're not fit for the job that they have to go on and do. Now, I've worked with Claire, the new CEO, in order to try and sort of fit a number of people, but there are two or three that unfortunately the founder brought in, and to an extent they brought them in knowing they just wanted a warm body at the time, and that's great. But you don't need a warm body as you start to scale. You need something else. You need a different attitude, different set of behaviors, and they can either adopt these behaviors, or if they don't have the right behaviors, if they don't have the right ability to change their behaviors and change their attitude to the new working environment, then you have to move on. And today we were in the situation where one of these people did leave, and the founder was, but this is a friend of mine, we can't do this. And I went, but this person is exhibiting the wrong behavior to where the business is going to be in the future. And it is, it is. You've got to trust the people you bring in and say, what's the greater good?
Right. It's difficult because businesses are very much like people. I mean, they grow and they change. And it's meant to be that way. It really is meant to be that way.
It absolutely is.
I mean, it's not necessarily, you start a shoe business and suddenly you're selling, dishwashers. That's not how they grow. But I mean, you could be selling pocketbooks. You could be selling leather goods. You could, you may find that there's a sustainability there with that makes sense of some of the items that are in the manufacturing process that you could partner up, and now you could sell some sort of sustainable product that matches what you're already doing, so and people need to grow with that, and it's not always easy. It's not always easy.
It isn't. These are the growing pains. These are the things that, as I say, I'm working with these businesses that are just beginning to go from sort of, maybe 5, 6, 7 team members through to the sort of 15, 20, 50, 100 team members. And it's a growing pain that you have to go through. It's a different attitude you have to do when you're at that business, when you're beginning to go down that. It's a different attitude. Too often business owners fail to recognize, for instance, that they need investment capital, or they need some money, and we go and we get some investment capital, but you can't see that as just a transaction. That investment is a longer term thing. It's not just let me have some money and then I'll carry on doing what I was doing, because the person that comes in with that investment, there's often an angel investor or potentially a venture capitalist or somebody like that, who will come with a set of expectations which you then have to manage. You then have to think about how you're going to use that and demonstrate that, and that's a completely different game. And too often I find that business owners are going, I didn't expect to have to be running a different business. Well, that's what growth of a business is all about. It is about learning to grow and manage a different business. And it may mean that some of the original targets, startup targets, so often they target the wrong company. They see a potential customer and they target that, and they can actually end up in a lot of trouble because they target, and I'll attest to this. We did this with one of the businesses that I ran. We saw a potential customer and we really heavily went after that customer. And that customer liked what we were offering. They took it. And the problem is that suddenly about 75 to 80% of the revenues from the business came from one customer. It was a hugely difficult situation because it was sucking a lot of our resources. We were having to deploy people onto this one team that was depriving other potential customers. We were focusing a lot of effort on that one customer. And then when that one customer turned around and said, we're done, we were suddenly left with a whole load of additional problems that we hadn't anticipated would happen. We just kind of assumed everything would continue as it was. And we had to make a lot of people, we had to let them go. We had to start with difficult conversations about where did we go wrong. And the problem was that we were a small company and we went after a big company thinking they were going to look after us. They didn't see us as somebody that they wanted to look after. They saw us as a transaction. There's lots and lots of things about growing a company where you have to start understanding the difference between the transaction and the longer term future strategy. And that's kind of, the one thing that they say to me, so, well, what do you bring? What do you bring? I bring a whole load of how not to do this right, and a whole load of mistakes, which I thought I advise you on not making in the way that I did.
Yeah, when you were talking, it reminded me a bit about a time when I was working. I interviewed for a company, and they basically told me that they would give me a 6-month review, which seemed normal. And it turned out that within 6 months, the company was sold.
Mm-hmm.
And I was let go.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back end, I realized the agenda was, unbeknownst to me, support the team, which is an integral part of this purchase, the sell of the company. So this particular department doesn't fall apart during the merger, during the selling of the company. And then at the end, and they said they would give me a review at the end of 6 months if I have something, if I've shown some talent where the company's going, they'll keep me. If not, I'm done. And I wasn't really that upset on the back end. I was very upset when I was let go. And then when I figured it out, because I did not know the company was sold, I got my 6-month review. They told me that, that thank you very much, but whatever, we're not going to keep you on. And then it wasn't a week later that I heard about the fact that the company was bought by another company. And I was like, oh, is that what this was all about?
Yeah, that was what it was about. That was absolutely what it was about.
And companies have to do this. I realized in the long run, I was like, the company needed to do this. If they were upfront with me, they could have been. They could have said, this is a contract job. We'll need you for 6 months. You are to support this department and make it look shining because we're in the middle of in a process. But perhaps they weren't allowed to do that. Maybe there was a disclosure, where they weren't allowed to talk about it, right? So, I mean, I sort of understand it, but companies have to do these types of things, and you don't.
And I will say that to an extent, I mean, as I say, I work a number of times with business owners, and we're going back to the example where the business owner I was just talking about, the founder brought in the new CEO, and during the process of bringing in this CEO, a lot of people were saying, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to make changes? And the founder turned around and said, yeah, we all knew that was coming, but I advised him, do not do that, because the people who will leave are the people you need to keep, because they're the ones that can get another job. But you just have to maintain exactly the same with everybody you meet. Everything goes as normal. Just keep working and keep believing in what we're doing and stay the course. And it was tough for them because they said, well, not entirely honest. And I went, no, it is honest because you've got to look to what's going to be happening in 10, 15 years for this company, not 2 years from today. So, sometimes business owners have this difficult choice. Do we sit down and be completely honest, or do we have to turn around and go, I'm just focused on what I have to do to make a success of the business? And too many people haven't got the ability to do that.
Yeah. There are so many different strategies that startups have, long-term businesses have, a company that is in the market to sell. But the go-to market strategy for a new business can really make or break that launch, because you launch and you're either lucky when you launch because maybe there are takers already. Maybe your sales have already gotten takers and you've got money rolling in and now you're going. But if you don't have a strategy, you can't rely on those, just like that one client that you had where you were relying on that one client and you figured, oh, we'll figure it out later. The problem is you never figure it out later.
Yeah, there's an interesting one, and I just want to sort of give you an example of a couple of sort of things that sort of I've thought about when I've done this in the past, Joy. I mean, I look at companies such as like Airbnb and companies like that. Too often what founders do is they sort of go, I know where I want to be in 2 years' time, so I'm going to build that now. And that's the wrong approach, because too often you don't quite know where you're going to be. So let's take an example of what I used to always say to people, and what I still say to people is test, test, test. So you start out probably using some really non-scalable solutions. In the case of something like Airbnb, if I recall the story right, with Airbnb, they stuck up a page which was, you could book a room in a house like this. And then what you do is when somebody clicked on the page and they sort of said, I want a room like this, they would convert that to an email, and the team would then go and look for something that looked like that and come back to you. They didn't have the flashy website behind it. There was another company that I'm aware of called Jasper AI, and they targeted people who were personally reaching out to marketing and manually onboarding them. Now that's great because it creates a sort of ripple effect, but it's not going to work when you want to have thousands coming on board. You just can't do it. But it's a great start because you get very, very direct, very immediate response from people that are onboarding, who give you the feedback and go, this works, this doesn't. From that feedback, you can then scale. You can then put in place the system. What you don't want to do is put that system in place before you've got that feedback, or you don't want to spend a lot of time building that system, because it's just going to be too expensive before you know if it's going to work. So, go to market by trying the very non-scalable, very direct approach, very responsive, get in feedback immediately. And once you've got that, once you've understood what your customer is telling you, then start building the systems around it which actually do scale. Don't try and scale too quickly, because it costs a lot and you can miss opportunities. You could miss feedback which actually helps you to do the job better.
Yeah, it sounds like you build a little microcosm and you start really small.
Yeah.
And then, you begin to feel where the wind is blowing, and then you start building your processes. You don't go to market with all these intricate processes, because you'll never get started. Everybody be in the routine. Oh no, we can't do it this way, I have to do it that way. In the meantime, none of the business is coming in for that, so it doesn't fit the model.
No, absolutely not. And so, for me, I've said this to a number of people, and they've sort of talked to me about sort of A/B testing. I don't do A/B testing anymore. I do A, B, C, D, E testing. I do as many tests as I can get away with. I will test everything, and I will test it in lots of different ways. Okay, my scientific head says, no, you don't test and make too many changes. But what you do is you you do a scientific experiment, and you do that scientific experiment, but you don't stand still. You then test it again, and you test it again, and you test it again. I tweak everything. And for me, getting that direct feedback constantly is the way to actually continuously improve. But you don't start with the big experiment. I mean, as a scientist, I didn't start with my biggest experiment. I started with tiny things, but I learned, and then I scaled.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that comes to mind are email agencies. So when I first started email, which was around 2006, I wanted to contract, or I wanted to start my own business. And I thought to myself, I'll give myself 6 months to see if I can get clients myself. And I'll decide what to do at that point. So at 6 months, I couldn't get enough clients for myself. And I realized I've got a few, but I can't scale this. I can't go any further with this, because if I'm so busy looking for clients, I won't be able to do the work. So this is not going to work. So that quickly became, I need an agency. And at that point in time, the employment agencies weren't really they were looking for, the marketing department, marketing people, but not email people. But I was able to find a few email agencies, and they were special, and they started off, the agencies that I work for, practically all of the agencies that I work for, email agencies, they started off strong. They got a lot of customers. Then the customers, within a year, 2 years, 3 years, the customers dropped off, and the business wasn't scalable. The email business wasn't scalable, because what was happening was every single email client they got either wanted to do it themselves after some time, thought they could do it themselves, whatever, or they were interested in SEO, website, other internet related channels. And the email agency was just specializing in email. So they were getting all of these requests that they couldn't they couldn't satisfy. And then they decided, you know what, we're going to hire an SEO person. We're going to hire a marketing person. And they started doing that, and they started growing. And this is sometimes the problem with a with a business model that, I don't know, ultimately can't grow. It's a little odd. These growth opportunities for some businesses get to a point where you either need to merge with another company, really blow yourself, really get more money and turn yourself into something that you never intended to do. Like these email agencies never wanted to become big, website solution companies. But some of them did. Some of them went abroad. So they in order to get a bottom line, they outsourced. So they laid everybody off and they went abroad, and they outsourced, and that's how they make their money. These are solutions, but sometimes the particular business that you have grows into something that, doesn't look anything like what you thought you started out with.
And I think there's an important aspect of business growth, actually, Joy. If we're going to sort of look at where too many founders start their business because they're a great technician, they love what they do, they just want to be able to do it for themselves as opposed to working for somebody, and that's great. If you want to develop a scalable business, though, you have to basically almost start with, okay, so where am I going to end? Am I going to go deep on a particular niche, really understand that particular niche brilliantly, and then sell my business because it becomes an asset, because I have got a depth and I've got a team of people that understand customers in depth in a way that another company will want to acquire us? Or do I want to be able to say, we want to start with this particular niche, but when we do, we want to expand our knowledge and scale our business so that we own a particular customer segment? Business owners need to sort of start that with okay, I'm starting my business, but I've got to know where I'm going. And too many just start a business and then think, oh, I'm getting bigger, so what happens next? And that's another element of the sort of the scale journey, which is, okay, you're going to bring in some money, and it's something that I help businesses do. So the first question an investor wants to know is, what's the plan? Where are we going from here? How am I going to get my money back? Are you going to sell your business because you've grown it, or are you going to become extremely specialized and then we're going to sort of become part of another business? What is it you're going to do in order to sort of get out of this? Because taking the money and just hoping for the best is not a plan. And too often, I think business owners don't recognize that actually developing a really deep niche business is hugely valuable to another business, because they'll look at it and go, I don't have that sort of depth of understanding of my customers, but I'd like it. And it's therefore an asset. A business becomes an asset in the same way that a house becomes an asset, or a piece of land becomes an asset, or a vintage car is an asset. It's something that you might enjoy. You might like to own it, but at the same time, it has value to other people because of what it is. And we don't see them like that. We don't see businesses in that way.
Sort of the difference between a corporation and a solopreneur. Now, both can niche down. Both can niche down, right? Both can do that. But the solopreneur may blindside themselves because they think, I'm just going to, I'm going to niche into this. I'm going to do this special thing. It's going to be okay. And I'm going to make a lot of money. And they may do that. And they may realize at some point, I'm not sleeping. I'm doing this. I'm a solopreneur. I'm doing this all myself. I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I'm a specialist. I have incredible value. But, I've often said, you can't pay me enough for this because I have no spare time to do anything. I'm constantly solving everybody's problem with the particular service or product that I have.
Yeah.
And then you have a corporation that does the same thing. The thing is, the solopreneur at some point in time can decide if you want to stay a solopreneur and you don't want to ever take on other people, it's just all about you, then you need to think about the partnerships. Like you said, you become an integral part of somebody else's business, whereby you create this partnership where, okay, you're still doing what you're doing, but now you've partnered up with maybe 2 or 3 other companies where you're an integral part of their company. You're a solopreneur, you're a contractor, whatever you want to call yourself. And now it's sort of along the agency model where they need you. They're going to be the ones selling you the client so that you could solve their client's problem.
That's correct.
That's one kind of solopreneur. The other solopreneur can be, I just want to find my own clients. Yeah. That's a lot of work. But
if it makes you happy, why not?
If you are a solopreneur that enjoys meeting people and you are able to balance the sales or the lead gen portion of the actual service or product that you offer, that's wonderful. But you have to keep in the back of your mind, can I do this forever? There's going to come a point in time where I'm not going to enjoy this anymore. This is just too much work.
Yeah. And the problem with that solopreneur lead gen is you tend to go through feast and then famine, because you win the client, you get busy doing the business, you forget to do any lead gen, the business comes to an end, or the project that you're doing finishes, or that customer then says we're moving on, and you have to start the lead gen again, which means you have a period when you're starting to do that. So for me, one of the things that I've been very aware of, that talking to solopreneurs, is, as I say, 2 things. One of which is you have to do a little bit of marketing and sales every single day, because otherwise you will find those feasts and famines get deep. You get very, 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 very busy, very potentially well well remunerated, and then you become very, very, very suddenly not busy and you're very desperate to find the next one. So you do something every day. So you try to smooth that out. The other thing that I do say, and this is where the scale up comes, is look, you end up winning more work than you can service. That's not a bad thing. Don't stop doing your lead generation. One of the things you can do is help your fellow business owner out. You might turn around and go, hey, yeah, I could help you, Mr. Customer, but I'm a bit busy at the moment. But I've got my colleague here who isn't busy, so they'll come and help me and we'll do it together. That doesn't mean you don't keep contact with that customer. It doesn't mean you don't have to be involved, but you're helping another solopreneur out, for goodness sake. What's wrong with helping out another solopreneur and being in contact with them? So you end up in a situation where you turn around and go, you do this work, I'll take 10% of it because I found the work, but I'm too busy to do it all, but I'll hand it off to you. It keeps you from the great feast and famine, but it's a nice thing to do, for goodness sake. We all ought to be nice to each other occasionally.
Yeah, it's always a nice concept, but I found it in the past that it needs to be some special people that share that relationship.
It does. Don't get me wrong. These are, but this is the thing about sort of doing the sort of reaching out to people and doing a little bit every so often. You do eventually find the people you feel you can trust, because you have to be working with people who are on the same wavelength as you. You have to be working with somebody that's actually going to do it. You're trusting your reputation to them. So they have to be able to do the job as well as you would do it. And there are very few people that I know who would be able to sort of do that, because we all have special skills, but you do find that, and it is part of doing it. It just saves you from that dreadful feast and famine, or at least from the ravages of the feast and famine. You can do that if you want.
Yeah, I think these are all the misconceptions when people start their own businesses,
they are misconceptions. You're right.
When people, and I'm finding today. I mean, the trend may be going back to corporations. I don't know. But I'm finding that a lot of people are are into this gig mentality where they realize, I've been doing this for, this company. I've been doing it well. I'm going to keep on doing it, but I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to get my own clients. And then they realize that even though they haven't, I mean, this is almost like they've done a startup without even thinking of doing a startup. They go out, they get a few clients, and now they don't, by not realizing it, they've got a company that they need to maintain.
They do. You are right.
Without even realizing that, that may be the furthest thing from their mind. And someone says to them, do you have any social? Do you have a website? Do you have, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm not doing any of that stuff. Well, why aren't you? You're a company, aren't you? What's your company name? Oh, it's just me. These things, and that can, in 5 years, that could turn people off. In other words, it's working now. In 5 years, it's not going to keep working because you haven't, there's no longevity there. You're working against yourself.
We were saying earlier, Joe, that is a your business is a potential asset. You have something there. You have specialist knowledge, specialist ways of dealing with things. You have specialist interactions, and if you can encapsulate that, I mean, even as simple as writing down how you deal with a project, how you deal with a customer, even as simple as that means that when somebody comes along and goes, I love what you do, either can you help me set up my business, or can I buy this business? You can turn around and go, I've got a manual ready to go. You can buy the manual. And what's that? Well, you've just sold a franchise. Just simply writing down how you do it, when you do it. It can be on a piece of paper, it can be in a notepad, you can make it into a fancy document if you want, but just simply writing it down is the start of you being able to liberate yourself from having to do this, as you say, in 5 years' time, when it gets to the stage where you go, do you know, I fancy a holiday on the beach for 3 weeks. I can hand my manual to somebody else and they can run my business for 3 weeks, and I can come back and the business will still be there. It is, once again, going back to one of my current clients, they're wanting to actually sell their business. We have a plan that we've put in place where they're going to sell it. And the first step in the plan was to get everything written down so they could take a 2-week holiday. They've just recently had a 2-week holiday. We had a review just the other day. Their plan is this year to go away for 3 months because the business didn't collapse when they went away for 2 weeks. They've now got to the stage where they've got some staff, they're trained, they've got a manual, everything's documented, everything works. They're going to go for 3 months. They're going to Canada. They're going to go and spend 3 months with some family in Canada. They're going to spend time with the family they haven't seen in many years. This is going to be the biggest test of whether or not they are ready to let their business go. A few years ago, it was a husband and wife team. Now it's a business with website, products, services, everything to do with it, a documented way of doing things. The staff all understand the way of doing it because it's written down and they follow the rules. And they're now planning to have 3 months in Canada. And when they come back, they expect the business to still be there. Now that's going to be a test. But for them, this is the holiday of a lifetime. Plus, they're looking at it and going, well, if we can do this, we can then start thinking about the fact we can sell this business, and this business becomes something that we will use to fund our retirement.
I'm just thinking of every company I've ever worked for, and I work for them as a contractor, and I always come into the company and I say, where's your documentation?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, your programmer is doing all of these things. If you're asking me to interface with your programmer, I'm either going to need to interview him or her, or if you give me the documentation, I can skim through it and get an idea of what's going on. Oh, okay. Well, we don't have any documentation. And this is twofold. That means that your new person coming in has no idea what's going on.
No idea. Yeah, no idea.
And now that's a mess in itself. And you lose your programmer, you lose it.
But the problem is, the new person coming in without that documentation takes a very long time, and by extension, a very great deal of money to get up to speed. As a business, you should not be looking at bringing in a new person and thinking we're gonna. There's an English word which I shall use now, which you'll guess what it means. Spaff away a year's worth of salary whilst that person gets up to speed. If you've got some simple documentation, even if it's not particularly complex, you can reduce the time it takes them getting up to speed from a year to maybe 6 months. And if you've got good documentation, to maybe 3 or 2 months, in which case you get a productive person for 10 more than you would normally have had. That is real business benefit. That's real growth. That's real productivity.
And at some point, that though all of those documents produce a well-oiled machine. I mean, that's not to say that things don't change. Just because you write a document doesn't mean that you have to do that process exactly that way. But it does identify those things that need to get done, when they need to get done, who's been doing them, where they're hosted, who's hosting them, what subscriptions you have. I mean, just the smallest amount of things, as opposed to, I don't know, it's a subscription somewhere, I will find it.
And the problem is the only person that might know about a subscription, if they leave the business and that subscription falls over, you've lost the service for as long as it takes you to recover that and to rethink exactly how that's going to. I
don't know how many times I've had to rescue people's websites because they hire a website person, they let the person go, they get it, and they never get any of the documentation. They don't know where the domain is. They don't know who's hosting, and they need these changes. I'm like,
And you will find there are a number of situations where somebody will turn around and go, well, the website's gone. And you go, okay, so where did it go? And they go, well, we don't know where it started. So we don't know where it's gone. We're going to start again. Oh, that's very painful. And, I did actually, as we were talking about what I do as a fractional person, basically is somebody sort of comes in for either a period, or I've been working with some of my clients now for sort of, I come in maybe 2 or 3 days a month and just sort of sit with them and work with them and sort of take on certain tasks. One of the things I actually started with one client was, okay, can we just understand what the potential risks are? I think we came down to, where's the website? Oh, we let a website guy buy that for us. Okay, who owns the name? Because that name is now really critical to your brand. And Claire, the CEO, we've just talked about, Claire, lovely, turned around to me and went, I've just realised it was bought by somebody else. I don't think we own it. I went, okay, that's going to be a very expensive purchase because they've worked out that you desperately need that name. Because at the moment, if you don't pay that money, you've got to change the name of your website and the name of your company and everything in the email, and that means you've got to start your email system again, and your customers won't know who you are. And do you want that cost, or do you just want to buy that name from the website guy, which you should have owned from day one because that should have been in the contract you drew up? And that's a painful lesson to learn, but it's one I made the mistake early in my career before I really understood what we were doing with these things. But it's a painful mistake to make when you turn around and go, somebody else owns what is the keys to my kingdom.
I've seen that a lot of times. A lot of times.
And by the way, if anybody is currently looking up the word spaff, write to me and I will explain it to you.
So, when we first started this conversation, the dogs needed to go out. Well, now the dogs need to come in. So the audience will hold for 2 seconds and we'll be right back. I'll be right back. She's actually out there howling.
Oh, that's lovely.
Okay, we're back.
Hello, doggy.
Oh, here we are. Yes, here we are. She's cursing me out with her tongue. Okay, good girl. So, all right, calm down. All right. Can you sit down? Down. So, I'm wondering, are there any measurement tools? Anything that people can use to measure where they are, where let's put it this way, the 3 month, the 6 month, the 9 month, the 1 year, any type of tools that you could use to measure your success or your non-success when you're doing something.
The one thing, rather than talking about tools or anything, Joy, the one thing that I will give in terms of advice is I think too many young businesses and the sort of scale-ups that I've been talking about, the sort of we've been describing, put too much store on having too many measures. A lot of business coaches go in and say you should be measuring return on investment this and customer satisfaction that, whatever. When I often get engaged with a business, they've got I've known some solopreneurs who are sort of trying to monitor 12 or maybe even 15 different metrics because their business coach has told them that they need to be measuring all these things. The one thing that I start with when I have to sit down and we're sort of defining a strategy, I go, okay, let's just measure one thing. We don't have to decide necessarily exactly what that is, but let's agree that we have one thing to watch, because that one thing needs to be related to the thing that you're driving towards. So, for instance, if you're trying to say that in 6 months' time you're an expert in understanding a customer's mindset, let's measure the one thing that sort of gives you an indication that you're going to get there. I call that sort of North Star metric, because if you can say, okay, we want to understand the customer's mindset, so we're going to do a survey of all our customers, and we're going to measure the one thing, which is, do they recommend us to their best customer? We measure that one thing, and we get closer and closer and closer to that one metric. That allows us to actually see progress, but it also means that the managers or the board of directors or the team are not trying to sort of be distracted. They're only focused on one thing. And it helps everybody get aligned, because too often you've got, and I've sat in meetings where the sales director and the marketing director are both trying to do the same thing, but they're measuring it in different ways, and they just don't see eye to eye. And as a result, the board is distracted because they're trying to work out which one of these two persons are actually the right one. And as a result, you think, I don't know which way to go. If you're all focused on one thing, there's a chance that even if you're wrong, you'll find it out. You know what they say about a plan? A plan doesn't survive first contact with the enemy. But what it does do is it allows you to say, we're off track or we're on track. And if we're off track, do we want to change, or do we want to sort of suddenly go in this direction because we've realized the plan we had was wrong? If you have no plan, if you have no North Star metric, it doesn't really tell you whether or not you're off track or on track. All you know is that you're doing. So I'm almost convinced that, that this is the best way of doing it, having done many different ways, that by having one single thing that we all focus on, and by measuring it constantly, we actually know if we're going towards it or if we're off track. And if we're off track, we can make a decision. We might decide, because we suddenly realize that we're no longer going to be able to achieve that thing in 6 months' time. Okay, let's not try anymore. Let's try something else. Maybe we've been trying to sell a particular product and it's just not landing. We go, yeah, but this product is. So let's go measure that one and start down that track. So having a plan, having that one North Star metric, makes you just say to yourself, are we on the right track? And if we're not, we make a decision.
How seamless do you make that to your customers? Because I've seen a lot of solopreneurs who start up and every 6 months they're doing something different.
Yeah, now that's a really interesting question. I think it's a really tough call. Sometimes a solopreneur has to do that because there's only the one of you, and therefore you have to sort of adjust. And sometimes that's the right thing to do. The problem is that a customer kind of comes to look at you and go, wait a second, I thought I'd rely upon them, and now they're off doing something else. So you risk losing some great relationships. The thing that I think that I like to see is, if you're going to make those changes, you have to know, and it's back to the plan, you have to know why. Rather than I'm making a change because I'm making this change because I've discovered something better, or I've discovered a better way of doing it, or I've discovered I'm not as good at doing that thing as I am as doing this thing. What worries me is people who make changes and can't explain why they're doing it. And this is where I think planning is so important. A plan basically it's not a bad thing. It just allows you to make a decision that you're going to be changing direction, but you know why you're changing direction.
It's difficult because, thinking along the lines of a bakery, you go to a bakery and they've got cookies and cake and all sorts of things. And then, for whatever reason, you go in and they're only selling cookies.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, where are your cakes? Oh, we don't sell cakes anymore.
No, we decided against them.
Right. Now, you've got, as you said, you've got all these, you may not be thinking that you've got all these clients, but you have people that have been coming, and getting some sort of service over time. And maybe you haven't told them you're only going to sell cookies, or maybe you did tell them you're only going to sell cookies and they took off before they even got to the cookies because they're thinking, oh, this person doesn't know what the devil they're doing. It's difficult being a solopreneur.
It is absolutely difficult. And, once again, we come back to the fact that if you're a solopreneur, you're doing it for a lifestyle. And if you're getting to the stage, even as a solopreneur, when it's taking up more of your life than you are getting life then you probably need to be thinking about systems and processes and things like that that will actually make you give you back a time with your family, give you time for away from work. And even a solopreneur can use AI automation systems nowadays to make their life easier.
It isn't so much of I mean, it's definitely a life it's a life balance that you decide to take when you're a solopreneur. I mean, when Henry Ford decided I'm making a motor vehicle and I'm going to roll it out. And then he said, how are we going to do that? I'm going to create the assembly line. And he kept going. Did he think that he was ever a solopreneur? At one point, he was an inventor. At one point in his lifetime, he was, it's me. I've got, or maybe I'll have a factory. We'll see how it goes. But he needed to keep making changes.
But the thing that he was fixed on was producing a car that everybody could afford. He had a solution. He wanted a particular outcome. He was focused on when I'm done, there will be a car for everybody and they can afford it. And that was the driving force. Now that kept driving the business bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But it was the one, we come back to the North Star. His North Star was a car that was affordable for everybody. Now, you can keep measuring that. There could be 1,000 things going on. And he could say, have we got to the stage yet where everybody has a car they can afford? No, we keep going. And that's the beauty of having that one driving metric. You can just keep going at it and going, have we got there yet? No, we keep going. You might find yourself in a situation where you've now got a big corporation and you just keep looking around and saying there's this profitability and there's this amount of marketing budget and there's this many salespeople, and you answer the question, have we reached that one thing that we set out to do? No, we keep going.
Mm-hmm. Solopreneur really, I keep on hitting that because I think it's a very difficult decision. I think it's almost a misnomer, almost a misnomer, because really you're a contractor. You're a freelancer.
The thing that worries me about the word solopreneur is, entrepreneurial people are people who are driving solutions and are prepared to keep driving that solution. So by necessity, you have to, if you're driving for that solution, if you're saying, here's my solution to this problem, the thing that we started with, if that's your entrepreneurial journey, I'm trying to provide this solution, you have to allow the expansion, you have to find a way of scaling. Solopreneurs are turning around and saying, no, I don't really want to scale. So I don't think preneurs should be on the end of it. Because what they are, as you said, are solo contractors. They're people who are trying to provide and enjoy a particular lifestyle. And I celebrate that. I think it's a great thing to do. It's a great thing to do because it's you taking back control and choice and saying, this is how I want to live. This is what I want to produce. This is how I want to do it. That's brilliant. But you can't say that you're trying to drive into a solution which can be scaled for everybody. So for me, you can't become a preneur bitch. You're a solo freelance contractor, you're a freelance consultant, you're a solo business owner. But you can't be the preneur because you're not trying to invent a solution which can be scaled. And I celebrate the people who want to spend their life being a person who actually enjoys taking back the control that they once had, that they gave up when they became a wage slave.
Exactly. I think most people need to understand that you will have the life that you like, but there still are sacrifices.
There are.
And those sacrifices might be the ups and downs of business where, I'm making tons of money. I've got no clients. Now, what am I going to do? All the business went away. And, you have to be aware that is going to happen.
And it will. Unless you get in place these, as I was saying, the systems, one of the things that I talk to small business owners like that, is that you have to put in, even if you don't really see the need as a solo person, you need a system behind it. You do need to have an automated system of lead generation, because otherwise you'll have the feast of famine, which will stress you out.
Yeah, exactly. So, Stuart, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, the easiest place to find me is if you go to LinkedIn, where I am www.linkedin.com/in/Stuart Webb. Or they can go look up the business. If you go to Systemize, that's SY, and you can tell it in the name, can't you? I love systems, and I work with business to help them put in these systems. Systemize.me. So that's SYSTEMISE.me, and that's where you'll find me.
I will put all that information below. And it's people can follow you if they like. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. I don't feel like I made any mistakes in my career. But while I was at it, I was floundering. But I more or less did what we just talked about. I did it all on my own. Went from corporate to my own company to a solopreneur contractor, and enjoyed it. Really.
Yeah, I go in to businesses. There's me now, and I love doing it. I realize I'm not trying to scale a business anymore. I'm now doing what I want. But I love working with the people I love working with, because for me, this is now a business where I turn around and go, there are people I want to work with, and there are some people I go, I have too much respect for myself to say that we'll ever get on. So I turn down the opportunity of working with people, and that's the choice that you make as a solopreneur.
Yes.
But it is not for everybody, and certainly most solopreneurs have to accept that they are probably, yes, they're going to be they want to be entrepreneurial, but entrepreneurial people have a desire to produce a solution which scales. And I know a lot of people sort of suddenly go, no, I don't think that's for me. Celebrate that. Just accept it.
Yeah.
Stop trying to do it.
Exactly. That was exactly what I needed to do at that point, when I realized there's nothing past this 9-month plan. I'm just going to find another job. Oh, wait a minute. So I'm just a contractor. Yeah, I'm just a contractor. Enjoy it. That's exactly the point. And that's when I realized, hey, just go with it. You might change, you might specialize, you might, whatever you might want to do. But once you realize, and it's really that North Star, get your North Star, realize what it is. And if it's big, if it's a big picture, hey man, you're an entrepreneur. If it's very small, okay, you know what you are.
You're a solo business owner, and enjoy the experience.
That's it, man. Everybody needs to enjoy the experience. I only wish that everyone could enjoy their own experiences. It really is my wish. I often wonder how I can share that with other people who I can clearly see are not enjoying.
Yeah, absolutely right. And everybody needs to accept the path and work their enjoyment of it. Life is a journey. It's not supposed to be a destination.
There you go. Thanks so much, Stuart. I really appreciate it.
Joy, it's been a pleasure.
And that's a wrap.